Have you ever stopped to think about what happens when a man who never needed anyone suddenly finds himself surrounded by people who want to destroy him before he even opens his mouth? Because that's exactly what Classroom of the Elite Four delivers right in the first episode. And look, this is not that slow start to warm things up kind of premiere. No, Season 4 dropped on April 1st, 2026 with a 90-minute special, throwing 4 episodes at the fandom all at once. And what Episode 1 does with masterful precision is lay down the rules of a new game, a far more dangerous one, where Ayanokoji now enters as a second-year student and already finds himself in the crosshairs of forces he can't yet fully identify. Advanced Nurturing High School was never a place to rest. Every hallway hides a trap. Every smile conceals a calculation. But the second year promises something different. The stakes are higher, the players are sharper, and there's someone new in that school who has been handed a very specific mission to end Ayanokoji. Feel the weight of that for a second. He spent all of Season 3 surviving Tsukishira, unmasking manipulations, winning invisible battles, and now, before he even gets comfortable in his second year, there's already an assassin disguised as a freshman walking those halls, looking for the best way to get him expelled. The episode opens with a scene that tightens your gut, a mysterious hooded student being instructed to eliminate Kiyotaka. We don't know who it is, we don't know exactly where they came from, but we know where that kind of person always comes from. The White Room, that dark place where children are turned into performance machines, destroyed from the inside to be perfect on the outside. The same place that shaped Ayanokoji himself. And here lies one of the season's greatest narrative triggers, the idea that the monster now faces other monsters built by the very same system that made him. But let's take a step back and understand the new board. With the start of the second year, the school introduces an app called OAA, Omniscient Ability Assessment. It sounds technological, it sounds modern, but at its core, it's just another cruel ranking tool. It displays each student's abilities as numerical values, making visible what was once subjective: mental agility, physical capability, leadership. Everything became data. Everything became ammunition. And here's the irony. Ayanokoji gets a C rating in the app. C. The guy who defeated Tsukishira, who manipulated everyone around him with surgical precision, who solved every special exam like a chess match 10 moves ahead, shows up as average on an app. Obviously, that's no accident. It's his choice. Staying invisible is the oldest and most efficient strategy in his playbook, and the episode uses this brilliantly to show that even with this entire new evaluation system in place, Ayanokoji is still playing outside the field everyone else can see. Then comes a special exam, and that's where the tension really starts to climb. The first exam of the second year is a written test in pairs, but with a rule that turns your stomach. Second-year students are paired with first years, and only the second years face the risk of expulsion if the pair performs poorly. The freshmen have nothing to lose. The veterans have everything on the line. Think about that. You have to trust a complete stranger who just arrived at the school, someone you don't know, whose loyalty is zero, whose motivations you can't read, and your future at the school depends on how they perform. This isn't an exam, this is a knife buried in the blind spot of every alliance. Enter Horikita Suzune, now the leader of Class 2D, trying to arrange the pair strategically. She wants to build alliances based on genuine trust, not point trades. Noble, admirable, and completely complicated when the name left without a partner is Ken Sudo, the most difficult student in the class, the one no freshman willingly wants as their partner. Horikita goes to Ayanokoji, because it always ends up coming back to him, and he agrees to help. Of course he does. This is where the new characters step into the spotlight, and the episode makes it very clear these freshmen are not background noise. Ichika Amasawa from Class 1A, cheerful, spontaneous, full of energy, and carrying a completely outrageous proposal. She agrees to be Sudo's partner, but with one condition. Ayanokoji has to cook her a decent homemade meal first. It sounds like a joke. It sounds like a playful freshman flirting around. But anyone who knows this series knows nothing happens by accident. Tsubasa Nanase from Class 1D, quiet, analytical, with eyes that seem to be measuring Ayanokoji every single moment. There's something in the way she watches him that isn't admiration, it's evaluation, like someone confirming a hypothesis they've been running for a while. Kazuomi Housen, also from 1D, aggressive, dominant, the kind of person who makes Ryuen look like a patient negotiator. He's pure brute force that doesn't fear confrontation, and he'll exploit any opening to establish dominance. And then there's Takuya Yagami from 1B, featured in the teaser, introduced as one of Ayanokoji's main rivals in this new arc. Still relatively quiet in episode 1, but with a presence that absolutely registers. What the episode gradually reveals, and it does so with elegance, is that Amasawa, Housen, and Nanase are connected in a way that goes far beyond ordinary school rivalry. The three of them share one objective: create a situation that forces Ayanokoji's expulsion. The whole setup with Pseudo wasn't a favor, it was a trap. The intent was to use the exam dynamics to frame Kiyotaka, to manufacture a scenario where he'd be held responsible for something he didn't do. But Ayanokoji is not the kind of character who lets his enemy choose the battlefield. In one of the most intense moments of this episode block, Housen engineers a situation where Ayanokoji would be accused of having attacked him. The logic was simple. A violent incident involving a freshman would be enough to trigger the school's rules and get him expelled. But Kiyotaka flipped the script. He took the hit on purpose, deliberately, calculatedly, transforming the trap itself into evidence that the plan existed and that he was the victim, not the aggressor. Pause. Breathe, because this isn't just anime strategy. This is pure psychology. The ability to absorb damage on purpose, to completely reverse the narrative. It's the difference between someone who reacts and someone who chooses when to act. And when everything settles, Class 2D and Class 1D form an alliance. Ayanokoji ends up paired with Housen for the exam, the same man who just tried to destroy him. Ironic? No. Intentional. Because keeping your enemy close, where you can watch them, monitor them, control them, is the oldest rule in Kiyotaka's playbook. But what this first episode truly plants, beyond all the action and strategy, is a question that will echo throughout the entire season. Who is the White Room student hiding among the freshmen? Not Amasawa, not Housen, not Nanase, at least not in the direct sense. The episode introduces a mysterious figure at the beginning, hooded, receiving orders, and by the end of the premiere block, that identity is still unrevealed. The most dangerous enemy Ayanokoji has this season is still buried somewhere in the crowd of new students, waiting for exactly the right moment. And that's a brilliant narrative move, because it recreates that feeling from the very first season, that paranoia of not knowing who to trust, of reading every interaction as a potential threat. But now, with Ayanokoji operating at a far higher level of awareness, he knows the assassin exists. He's looking. He just doesn't know who it is yet. Studio Lurch maintained the visual identity that makes this series genuinely unique. Tight frames that create the sensation of being watched. A soundtrack that doesn't try to make you feel, it pressures you. That low pulse, that tension sitting underneath every scene, like the hum of an engine in the dark. And then there's Garizawa. Kei is back, and she continues to be the character who has grown the most in depth across every season. Here, she serves as an emotional anchor in an episode full of cold calculation, because Ayanokoji can be a strategist with everyone, but with her, something is different. Not obvious romance, it's subtler than that. She's the only person with whom he seems to be not completely behind a wall of glass. What Classroom of Elite 4 Episode 1 ultimately delivers is a promise that this second year won't just be harder, it will be different in its very nature. The threats now come from inside the same system that created Ayanokoji. The rules of the game are the same, but the players finally seem to be operating at his level. And that raises the biggest question of the entire season. If Ayanokoji was built to be the White Room's perfect product and now faces other products of that same system, how much of who he is today is actually him, and how much is just programming waiting to be switched off by someone who already knows the source code?